Hey everybody, welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast. We are figuring out how to run your business like a saint, how to fully integrate the faith into how we run our businesses so that we can become powerful instruments of God's will in the world. We've got a very special episode today. So I invited fellow podcaster Travis Callaway onto the show to discuss how we can apply the famous encyclical Rerum Novarum in the age of 2025, in the 21st century. And we structured this into two parts. First, Travis breaks down what Rerum Novarum aimed to communicate in the first place, and then we go through how to apply each of those things in 2025. We definitely covered quite a lot of things, so I would say get out a notepad to write a couple things down as we go through, because you're going to have plenty of ideas on how you might apply Rerum Novarum to your business. And if you have not already, I would recommend checking out Travis's podcast. It's called Coffee, Commerce, and Catechesis. Really great show that they put on there. And two other things before we start is if you are listening, please give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast player. Consider it a bit of a almsgiving for all the value that you get out of the show. And if you are looking for a community of other Catholic entrepreneurs who you can build with, learn from, consider joining the Catholic Founders Guild today. It's $10 a month or $100 a year, so literally anybody can afford it. Our goal is to get as many Catholic entrepreneurs in one place as possible to serve as a sort of a kind of connection hub for the ecosystem, if you will. All you have to do is go to Substack and click Upgrade to Paid. Any tier will get you into the group. And as an FYI, we are actually having a call with the Catholic Founders Guild tonight to discuss the topic of stewardship. So if you'd like to join that, click Upgrade to Paid right away. Drop me a message on LinkedIn and we will get you sorted out. And without any further delay, enjoy the episode. All right, welcome to the pod, Travis. Glad to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me.
Super excited. Before we do get started, I want you to quickly plug the podcast that you guys work on. I know you've got a lot of hats, but can you just tell us a little bit about that podcast before we start?
Yeah, so with my business partner and dear friend, we have a little podcast, Coffee, Commerce, and Catechesis. And we basically talk about things that are of relevance to committed Catholic Christians living in a hostile secular world. And so we talk about education, business, family, everything in between. And so a bunch of the stuff that we talk about and we care about individually is things that would resonate with you as an individual. I'm sure things like AI, human dignity, the economy, how we Catholic Christians need to think about engaging in a modern economy, etc. So yeah, Coffee, Commerce, and Catechesis for anyone who cares.
Where's the coffee part of that come from? Just because you like drinking coffee or what?
Okay, so yeah, the story behind it is kind of cool. So the Coffee, Commerce, and Catechesis, CCC, is an ode to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So there's that, but we needed 3 C's, and so the commerce part was easy. It's a double meaning. Commerce originally, now it means like business, but originally it meant just an exchange of almost anything, including ideas, and that's what we do. We talk with people way smarter than us about things, and we're businessmen, so commerce. Catechesis because we need it always, and so it's and it's obviously a Catholic sounding word. So and then we needed another thing to fill out the CCC, and I'm like, well, I'm obsessed with coffee, so why don't we just drink coffee while we talk about these things? And there we had it. So yeah, Coffee,
That's
Commerce,
nice.
and Catechesis.
That is true. I did think about the CCC thing when I first saw it. I was like, maybe that's what it is, but no, I like that. You've got some pretty good episodes on there, so I recommend anybody who listens to this would definitely enjoy your episode, your show.
I appreciate that.
I'd recommend people check that out. So I'm going to do my best here. I mean, I'm not going to try to give you too much of an intro. You've got a lot of things going on. If you want to list them out, feel free to do so. But, I would just say this much. People should check out Travis Callaway on LinkedIn and see what he's up to. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you guys could interact with. Today, we've got a very packed agenda, so we're going to try to kind of get into this right away. The basis, I'm going to try to set this up properly. The basis for this was I saw you had shared a LinkedIn post about an article that you had written in, if I remember, was it Catholic Herald?
The Catholic Herald, yeah.
And the basic principle you were trying to you're talking about is bringing kind of applying Rerum Novarum into the 21st century, right? And I personally I did read it, but I hate reading, so I wanted to bring you on the podcast to have you kind of break it down. And maybe the core things I'll just highlight why this is really, really relevant to us right now is, the Rerum Novarum was originally written by Pope Leo XIII, and it was really at the intersection of the Industrial Revolution. We were trying to figure out how do capital and labor work together. Obviously, that evolved a lot over the coming years, and then Laborum Exercens by John Paul II was written. Really focusing on I guess you'd say almost like the second industrial revolution with automation and machinery. And then now it's super exciting for us as Catholics because we've got Leo XIV, who just seems to be on fire. Also, I think apparently the number 1 most popular person in the world right now.
I just read that, yeah.
Unsurprisingly. And it's important because he recognizes that we're going through this, I don't even know what number we're on, but another industrial revolution, if you will. With AI and automation. So applying this to the current age is really important, and especially for all of our listeners who are primarily all Catholic business owners, we have a responsibility to kind of set the tone for how this should be used. So I'm going to aim to take the perspective of a student while you kind of teach me. And we'll start with, again, feel free to intro any of the ventures that you have, and then we'll go into what are the basic points of Rerum Novarum.
I'll caveat. So I encountered Rerum Novarum as a document. It is a papal encyclical written in 1891, like you mentioned, by Pope Leo XIII. And it was written at, we could say, a disruptive time. That word gets overused, especially among people that are fans of tech startups and stuff, which I am one of them, so I get it. But Pope Leo XIII was living through a truly disruptive time. And you had a lot of people responding to that disruption, and we can say economic disruption, including worldviews that are profoundly antithetical to the Catholic faith, socialism and all its perverted variants thereof, radical communism, etc. And so in this crowded intellectual space, the church needed to respond and explain, everyone with eyes to see can look around and be like, there are problems that have resulted from the way our economy is changing. What do we do about it? And the socialists seem to have answers. They seem pretty scary, a lot of them. And well, now, fast forward 140 years, we can see where that leads, obviously. But at the time, a lot of those solutions theoretically could probably be seen pretty attractively to a lot of people committed to the Catholic faith. And so I think Pope Leo XIII wrote this document, Rerum Novarum, at that time trying to address these issues: class struggle, concentration of economic power in the hands of the few, the plight or struggle of the working class, which was huge, and all trying to focus on human dignity. What does it mean to have human dignity? Why should you care about it, etc.? And so that's effectively what the document does. But more for me, I won't pretend to be an expert in the document itself. What I try to do as a Catholic businessman is utilize Catholic social teaching, which started intellectually with this document. It's given us now the Catholic intellectual tradition in the sphere of Catholic social teaching started with this document. And so even if we don't know all the answers to complex economic problems, complex business problems, we know where we can go. And it started with the document Rerum Novarum.
Okay, awesome. That's a really good summary. I appreciate that. So then let's cover kind of point by point at least in your opinion, like the core things that he was really highlighting through that, and you can kind of dive deeply into those, and then maybe leave some space for me to jump in if I do have any questions.
Yeah. So I think it's an expansive document, like all papal encyclicals, right? There's a lot that's packed in there, and you could tease out a lot of individual things. But some of the really important things that we can focus on are a defense of private property, which is obviously related to that is a condemnation of socialism. Socialism basically says that no, private property is not a thing. And this document asserts that no, private property is something that we human beings have a right to. So defense of private property is outlined. The appropriate role of the state in defending things like private property. Again, socialists would go too far in that. The state does have a role to play in defending our individual rights, etc. But in the worldview espoused by socialists, it takes it too far, to the point where the individual person's dignity is secondary, if it matters at all, secondary to the state. So it outlines a proper role for the state. Then it also explains the duties that workers have to employers and vice versa, the duties that an employer has to their workers, and always with this focus on human dignity. How do I make sure that if I'm working for somebody or I'm employing somebody, how do I treat them with the dignity that they are due as a human being?
Well, on that point specifically, what are, I guess, if you can bring out specifics, what are some of the things that he was saying at the time that the employers had a responsibility how to treat their employees?
Yeah, so simple things like you I think the word that gets used is bondsman, and we could almost think of bondsman as like a form of servitude, or almost to the point of what we might think of even today as like slavery, where this person is so dependent upon their employer that just to survive, they could almost work for infinite number of hours and still it not be enough. And so you as an employer have an obligation to treat this employee with dignity, which means simple things like making sure that they have Sunday, the Lord's Day, to go to mass and spend time with family and friends, enjoy a rest or whatever. Even if they're willing to, you can't allow them to just work indefinitely because they need to. That would be like one simple example. And that sort of thing was happening. As a result of the Industrial Revolution, you did have circumstances where some employers were more than happy to let certain employees who were desperate to basically work until they died. Work up to the point where they literally are unable to do another step. And the document articulates that, no, from a Christian perspective, the Lord's Day is a sacred day, employers need to make sure that their employees have the chance to treat that day with the reverence it's due.
That's a good one. I guess I never really thought about that. I mean, I enjoy working, but I don't know if I enjoy working that much.
Totally.
Maybe it was from the perspective of providing for their family rather than that. So would that also include, like, maybe this is separate in the document, but would that also include ensuring that they're paid enough that they don't have to do that?
Exactly. Like in modern terminology, we'd probably say like a living wage, right? So ensuring someone, it's one thing to be like, well, I'm paying them, right? And it's like, and you could even make an argument someplace like, well, I'm paying them the minimum wage if there was such a thing that was established. It's like, okay, but if the minimum wage isn't enough for them to survive still and provide for their family, are you treating them with dignity? You may be meeting your legal obligation, but legality and morality are not the same thing. And this document does a good job of articulating that. We hope as Christians that our laws do reflect morality, but in Western countries, we all know that what is legal is almost always now compromised from a moral perspective. And so this document really highlights that you as an employer have an obligation to go above and beyond what is the bare minimum you ought to do or what you should do, and focus on, okay, to treat them, this employee of mine, with dignity. What ought I to do, including paying them a fair wage for the nature of the work that they're doing?
Yeah, and that would go also to the point of effectively the people who right now would say, oh, it's capitalism, it's fair market. Like if they're willing to take the job, that means it's a fair wage. I mean, what would you say to that? Again, you can put it in terms of now versus then, but I'm curious, what would you say to those people?
Yeah, I'd say so. A lot of people, I think there's a danger today too of people assuming that capitalism is just a given, right? Capitalism is not just a given. What we think of as capitalism literally didn't exist until like a couple centuries ago. Prior to what we think of as capitalism today, it was like a mercantile economy, right? And so people naively assume that capitalism is just by default the economic system that we have, and thus somehow is morally superior to the others, which is stupid. That's an ignorant view of history. The document Rerum Novarum takes as a given that capitalism is here to stay, doesn't assume it's here forever, but it does assume that capitalism is here to stay, and says, given that we assume capitalism is here to stay, how can we help people understand within this system to respect human dignity, both from an employment perspective and employee perspective? And so, yeah, to the comment about in a competitive market, people have the option of taking a job or not taking a job. Well, do they really? I mean, if it's a competitive market and you have children to feed, you will do things that are not in your best long-term interest because your child is going to starve to death. So you might put yourself in a circumstance where I just need a paycheck today. That means that you can't look for a job that would pay you more because you need money today. You can't wait for a month to get a better job, right? And so, and this, I think that became really real for me when I got out of my like little super insulated bubble in the rich Western world. My wife is a refugee. My wife came from a war-torn country, and I spent a lot of time in that country now. It's also a capitalist country, but people there literally have to make money to live that day. And so that is closer to what was going on in England, certainly in other parts of Europe affected by the Industrial Revolution. So we need to put ourselves in that framework. If we think about it from the perspective of capitalism in Canada or the United States, that's not what Rerum Novarum was seeking to address. A lot of things that have happened since then are probably positive developments, but I do think we need to keep that in mind, that even in a free market where someone has the option of taking a job, well, their circumstances might dictate that the option isn't as much of an option as we like to think it is. They might not feel like it's an option. They need to do something to survive.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting perspective. I guess without getting too sidetracked, I am curious about your thoughts on just this idea of short-term versus long-term thinking.
Yeah.
How would you try to really make it impactful and kind of insert into people's minds about what matters? And why long-term thinking matters so much as a business owner, but also from the perspective of an employee. Again, if you have the luxury, if you will, to be able to not worry about just today, how can you get people to start thinking like that? And once they're hired to, as an employee of the business, to think long-term, because it feels like more and more our current world is just oriented towards everything short-term.
Totally.
Even our content.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And it's a perpetual struggle, I would say. A way to make this tangible and real, I think that will resonate with most people, is most people are familiar with the concept of compound interest, right? The idea that earnings on other earnings over time becomes a really big number. I'm making it super simple, like to keep it non-economic. Well, that compound interest really is only impressive with a long period of time. What that also means is doing something today that might not be in your best interest today because you want to go out with your friends, or there's a new movie coming out and you're a big fan of this director or whatever. So to have the ability to generate compound interest means you are making investments today, savings, you're not consuming today. So it's this trade-off between consumption and savings. And so that's a very real example where we all know what it feels like to know I could be saving this money for the future. It would be generating compound interest. So in the future, I'll be glad for it. But today it feels really painful to give up this thing that I want to do, or even this maybe objective good that I want to do. Like maybe what you want to do is something to help somebody else. And that means punishing yourself from a long-term perspective. So that I think makes the economic idea of the trade-offs between short-term and long-term very real. And that affects everybody in the world. Anyone who handles money deals with these sorts of things. When it comes to a business setting, if you're a business planner, for instance, how do you know? Let's talk about a topic that's all the rage, and Pope Leo XIV is very concerned about, which is artificial intelligence. You as a business owner, should you be investing in artificial intelligence? If you say yes, you probably it's almost certain that you don't even really realize what you're saying. Like you're probably saying, yeah, I think it's cool that my team will use ChatGPT occasionally. But if you take it like, hey, should I be investing in a future business that'll be theoretically more efficient, can make me a lot more money, but will also quite possibly employ a lot fewer people? Should you be doing that? You won't see the results immediately, obviously, and it'll be very expensive immediately to do it, but it could be incredibly lucrative in the future. But will you even feel good about it in the future when you get there? These are complicated problems. And I don't know, but as a business owner myself, as someone that advises many Catholic startups and stuff, these are the sorts of questions that we have to wrestle with. And the way we do it, I think, is going to documents like Rerum Novarum and the Catholic social teaching movement to be like, there aren't easy answers to these really, really complex questions. But I should try to educate myself insofar as I can so that I'm at least making an imperfect decision with as much information as I can grounded in my faith.
Yeah. So just two things in that, and then you can continue on the points there. Is one, I think, from an AI perspective, my general take would be that because so many people will become unemployed because all the managers of the business, the investors will only care about the ROI. I think as Catholics, we have a responsibility to be able to buffer and make our profits as big as possible, so that way we can help the people who are going to be out of work, to help our family members. Like if there is possibility of greater margins and greater profit, we should use that to continue employing people, right? Even if it comes down to a situation where like the whole company must take a pay cut in order for everybody to still maintain some employment, that should be what we do. And then this idea of long-term thinking, it's very similar to, I guess, foregoing sin to try to get to heaven, right? It's like building the business for the long term. Like, why would I do that? It seems like so much of an effort when I can just make a buck today. Because it's like, if you make shortcuts now, it'll lead to a poorer reputation. And the interesting thing about reputation is that you can spend your entire life, or almost your entire life, doing something really well the right way, and then it just takes basically 1 year or one bad decision to literally ruin the entire thing. Not forever, but for a very long time, and they have to rebuild it. So it's one of those things where it's like you have to maintain that long-term goal in mind. So if somebody's not sure of how to visualize it, just imagine it in terms of your own journey towards heaven. So anyways, I'll pause there. You continue on those points.
Yeah, and then really well stated. I think you're right. And the thing that we have to keep in mind is the moral life, the Catholic moral life, requires at a really fundamental level that a simple concept: the ends never justify the means, right? For a decision to be morally permissible, per the teaching of the Catholic Church, both the means by which the ends come about and the ends themselves must be morally good. And if either of those pieces are missing, then it wasn't a morally okay thing to do. Now, in practice, of course, that's very complicated because there are some times where it's not quite certain what is the morally correct thing to do. Right? Just war theory is a great example. Like if an aggressor country invades someone else, can you actually defend yourself? Well, just war theory says yes, but under very narrow specific circumstances. That's an extreme example to prove the point that in the moral life, and the moral life applies equally to us businessmen, like when we are making decisions about our businesses, the ends don't justify the means. The means themselves have to be morally okay. So when we're making decisions to maximize profits or whatever it is, we have to make sure that even though we intend to use those maximized profits for good things, even if we say, an extreme example, say I wanted to give 100% of the profits that my business generates to the Catholic Church. Let's just say that's what I wanted to do. That's an objectively amazing thing to strive after and want. But if I take individual decisions that themselves are immoral to get there, then getting there is not an okay thing to do. So the individual decisions we make, who it is that we choose to hire, when we fire them, how we treat them when they work for us, all of those things also matter. And I know that's unpopular for our TikTok brains because our TikTok brains want a 13-second answer for horribly complicated questions. And I'm sorry, that's just not the way the moral life works, and it doesn't change when you're in the business setting.
Awesome. So let's continue on then. the next thing, I think the next point you had was harmony between the classes, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, exactly. So certainly in the 19th century, and this is largely what gave rise to this notion of socialism. I mean, socialism as a materialist, fundamentally atheist worldview focuses on class struggle. It doesn't focus on anything transcendent. Obviously, it focuses on all we have is the here and now. The here and now implies classes that are in conflict with one another, like lower class, upper class, business class, peasant class, etc. So Rerum Novarum identified, and if you can give credit where it's due to the socialists, they were identifying real problems, right? The way they go about solving those problems is evil and horrific. But they did identify, it's kind of like wokeism, right? Like people that are woke, they point to oftentimes real challenges. The way they go about solving those challenges is preposterous and poisonous and evil, but they are pointing to real issues. And so Rerum Novarum also points to what the socialists were identifying, which is this struggle between classes is a real problem. And we can solve that problem if we root ourselves, hopefully, in human dignity, treating people with human dignity, even if they are in other classes, not allowing us to be at war with each other because we're in different classes, still loving one another and treating people in other classes with the dignity that they deserve as human beings. So that is the idea. A hard thing to do in practice, of course, but that is what the document is striving us to think about as a possibility in our societies.
Hey everyone, quick interruption. I have something really, really exciting I want to share with you. We are announcing a sponsorship partnership with Verso Jobs. These guys are absolutely incredible at helping Catholic founders to hire people who are actually aligned with their mission. They have built this really, really incredible gamified and data-driven job platform that helps you hire people who actually share your mission and values. The best part is it's built by Catholics. Whether you're hiring for your startup, school, parish, or nonprofit, Verso makes it easy to find mission-aligned talent ready to build the kingdom. Just visit versojobs.com to get started. That's Verso, V-E-R-S-O, jobs.com to get started. All right, back to the show. And then what's this next one? Importance of associations.
Yeah, so, unions have a bad reputation, I'd say, in the West, certainly in North America, right? And the frequency of unions or the popularity of unions has waned significantly. If you pull up on a chart, like the prevalence of unions in Canada and the US for like the last 100 years, like you see it go down a crazy amount. I don't know the data exactly. So to us today, it's like, why are we even talking about this? This seems like something from a bygone era. Well, there are still countries in the world where unions have a very powerful role to play. Germany is a good example, right? Like Germany, workers' associations, maybe union is the wrong word, a workers' association, a group that helps protect the interests of a certain class of professionals and negotiates on their behalf with employers is the way we can think about it. And there's a totally valid role for that. I mean, you see it in professional sports, right? Like the National Football League has the NFLPA. So does Major League Baseball. Like these things exist even at the highest levels of our economies and stuff. You see it in Hollywood, right? With the Writers Guild and all this kind of stuff. These are all just a version of workers' associations or unions. And so what Rerum Novarum did is explain the rightful place for these unions in a modern economy, modern at the time, obviously. Now, of course, what's happened, unfortunately, is some of these unions over time got corrupted. There's influence from like mafia figures and all sorts of crazy stories. And sadly now, if we look in, the 21st century, we've also got this, progressivist ideology that's filtered into a lot of the unions where it's almost like they forget what they even exist to do. And they start advocating for a whole bunch of things that they were never there to do. What they should be doing is advocating for the proper treatment, grounded hopefully in a Catholic worldview and human dignity, and advocating to an employer on behalf of the employees from that perspective. So the document takes that very, very seriously, and subsequent documents, subsequent encyclicals round that out a little bit more. But yeah, where you and I live, this is less of a concern, it seems, just because the prevalence of workers' associations, unions, has just waned so much over the last 6, 7, 8 decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a point that I'll bring up when we apply it to the current time later, but you want to finish the last point, then we'll go into that section.
Yeah, sure. So, the last real area that I'd say that Rerum Novarum focuses on is a call to Christian charity and a focus on eternal life, which is really to say the document stresses that earthly life matters. It's not that it doesn't matter, but it's a pilgrimage, right? And that true happiness exists only in the life to come. And we can never lose sight of that, right? And so, which is to say that the document reminds, if you're in a fortunate position of being wealthy, well, riches, while inherently just fine, can be an obstacle to eternal happiness, right? If they focus your attention too much on the here and now and the material, right? And so If you are in a position where you're wealthy, well, then you have a duty grounded in Christian charity to share your earthly riches with those who have less than you do, right? Perennial Christian teaching, right? This is something. This is almost like the easiest thing for the document to tap into, because it's literally going back 2,000 years, drawing upon the earliest Christians in the way that they lived their lives. A focus on Christian charity, and that we are pilgrims here in this world, and that earthly riches, while fine in and of themselves, can be a distraction to the ultimate goal, which is to be saints and make it to heaven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one comment I'll throw in there. It's like it seems sometimes very difficult, especially in the West. We think about this a lot because cost of living is constantly going up, and the hidden tax of inflation and everything. But we're always like, how can we save enough money for retirement? Can we be responsible in these ways? And then it's generally inward focus. Maybe you're focusing on your family. Okay, I understand being responsible as a provider and whatnot, but we oftentimes get too caught up into it, and we're just like, full on Dave Ramsey or whatever. It's like we're just focused on ourselves, and we forget that there's also the element of providence. And it's not. I think it's a noble thing to pursue those things, but you have to do it in a way where you're like, sometimes you have to listen to what your heart compels you to do. It's like, hey, I have this sometimes where I don't really think about the finances of it. I'm like, I think I should give this money to this person because of whatever. I don't even think about it. I just like, it seems like I should do it, and I do it. And I think that we need to get a little bit more of that back into our culture, so we can just rely on God for our retirement, right? I'm not saying to be completely irresponsible, but especially for family, but don't make it the end all be all, because you have to remember that God will take care of you. Just like the lilies of the field, my favorite scripture, that even if they get thrown in the fire, they don't mind, because God's giving them exactly what they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's now shift this into, then again, just to kind of really put it bluntly, how can we apply these things, these principles, into 2025, to the 21st century?
Yeah, really important question, because I think if you just go off of the narrative that's common in our culture, the answer is you don't worry about any of these things. And so it's very easy if you're a non-discerning Catholic business owner, the culture itself and the narrative that you hear is never going to remind you of the things that we need to remind ourselves of. So I'd say like that. I put that out there as a beginning part, is that you have to actively remind yourself to seek out the things that you need to be thinking about in terms of applying our faith as grounded in Catholic social teaching into the way that we make individual decisions on a daily basis. And so for me, what that looks like, whether it's as chief operating officer for Castletown Media, we're a Catholic film studio, we make a lot of amazing content, but just because we're working with Catholics, as Catholics, making stuff for Catholics, it doesn't mean that we don't encounter the same business problems, the same challenges, the same struggles that any secular organization does, or people that have no faith whatsoever. And so something that we, I think, do a pretty good job of, not that it's easy, is reminding ourselves all the time that we need to focus on human dignity and extending that thinking to everyone that we do business with in the workplace. So yes, of course, obviously, we assume that our colleagues that need to be treated with dignity, but so do our suppliers, so do our customers, and everything. And extreme examples is like, you're having a bad day, okay, and you get a customer that calls and they're complaining to you about something that you had nothing to do with and it's not your fault. The easy thing to do might be like, you know what, you're a jerk, I'm going to talk to you like a jerk. Really, that person still deserves dignity, even if they're not acting towards you like you deserve it. Try to treat them like a child of God. Right? And so try to conduct yourself so that you still talk to that annoying, unreasonable customer in a way that respects their dignity, as a good example. And creating an environment where your employees are encouraged to do the same thing, right? So that I think is an important thing. Remembering that human dignity applies to every human, no matter where they come from, no matter what they look like, no matter what they believe, even when they hate us, even when they believe the opposite of what we do, they still deserve to be treated with dignity. And in our cultures, of course, in the secular West, we interact with people of all sorts of beliefs and no beliefs all the time. And so I think that's especially critical given the nature of the society that we live in.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just point out there is, like, if you're going to try to do that yourself towards your customers, and you expect your employees to do so as well, it has to first come from you, right? You have to treat your employees with that respect and with that dignity, and recognizing that they are human. I mean, I've seen even like really supposedly, we say modern or liberal organizations that they really, they claim to be really focused on their employees and being a great place to work. Yet, when there's a death in the family, like your PTO policy, you get 2 days. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, that's crazy. We can't have that. We have to embody it as leaders towards our people, and they will generally reflect what we do. Even if you don't tell them, they'll usually reflect kind of your action set. And then it goes without saying, but if you do this well to your customers, if they are reasonable people, they will always recognize that they were wrong in the first place, and it will develop even greater brand loyalty, which again, you make more money doing so. Don't do it for that reason. but it does have, positive consequences on the end.
Totally.
One of these things would be, I guess, this is probably not as much of a concern, at least in the West currently, but I believe part of this is ensuring good working conditions for your employees. Are there
Yeah.
any specific ways that you would apply that to the current age? Because again, it seems like everything is pretty chill. Like most people work from home, from their laptop or whatever. Like, how would you talk about that?
Yeah. You're 100% right. Like in some places, it's more important than others.
Yes.
Where you and I live, probably less so. But I can think, where my wife's family lives, where she comes from, Colombia. Colombia is a developing country, but it has a lot of problems, and there are certainly workplaces there where workplace safety is an afterthought if it's thought about at all. So yeah, there are parts of the world where very much the conditions that your employees are exposed to matter a lot, and you need to think about it a lot. I think certainly certain simple things that we can, as Catholics in, say, North America specifically, think about is, well, yeah, I'll use an example from my personal life to make the point. Castletown Media, again, we're Catholics. Well, if we're going to talk about we're Catholics, being Catholics, so that we can win business, well, then there are things that Catholics should be doing in their lives, right? And we need to create a workplace such that the Catholics can live their Catholic faith rather than us just talking about it because it looks good on marketing materials and stuff like that. So maybe for us, that looks like giving everyone an hour a week or whatever to go to their parish for adoration or something like that, because the times aren't convenient for people that are working 9-to-5 jobs, as an example, right? And so would that be relevant in other workplaces? Maybe not, but for us, we want to create a setting where we're Catholics. We want Catholic Christians to be able to work and be like, I can live and practice my Catholic faith and not feel like I'm compromising it, while my employer proudly talks about how Catholic we are. So, those are the sorts of things that I think probably matter more for us in North America than workplace safety and stuff. Not that those things don't matter, but that's outside of my wheelhouse. It's outside of my area of expertise.
Yeah, it sounds like you're running some kind of like big manufacturing facility or
Exactly.
something. So I will say one point here that you alluded to this earlier, that even the woke movement kind of got some things right, they just approached it wrong. Is this really depends on how much stewardship how far you want to apply the principle of stewardship, but the people that have to really face these actual like unsafe work conditions or slave labor or child labor, those are in many cases probably like either one or two steps removed from us in terms of our suppliers. So depending on what you buy, right? I don't know, for a lot of us, like we have services. There's not many real suppliers, but you should really consider who are you buying from, and are you going to promote purchasing and even paying more perhaps for the people who are making sure that they are treating their employees correctly. And again, it's very difficult to know these things. The ESG movement, I worked in the space to an extent, has done a pretty good job of trying to highlight a lot of these things. Again, it's not always perfect, but it gives you an idea, and that is certainly in line with Catholic social teaching of making sure.
Yes.
So just keep that in mind too, is like the second order effects, the things that you're maybe not directly connected to, but you could influence, especially if you're like a big buyer of something, right?
Absolutely. No, that's really a point really, really well made. Given the nature of the investment industry and, the internet and everything, it's actually not that hard to seek out some of this information now, to see what are these organizations engaging in, what are they supporting or whatever. All the time? No, of course not. And that'd be an unreasonable standard to hold to yourself. But certainly if you become aware of things that are distasteful or whatever, well, then you should definitely not be engaging in business with them, right? And you might even take it upon yourself to go a step further and actively seek out the information, especially if, like you said, you're in a position of being a major buyer. You can potentially, quote unquote, move markets.
Yeah. And I also point out there's probably even smaller things. It's like, this may be a terrible example, but like if you stash your workplace fridge or something with soda, maybe there's like a better soda provider that's
Totally
pro-life or something. I don't actually know if there is. If there is, please shout it out in the comments. These are small things that we can do that can make a big difference.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we'll move on from that. That's we covered that one well. What are the other ways? What's the next one that you would bring up?
Yeah, so the concept of a just wage, and this one gets a lot of pushback, I think, because people will assume that minimum wage, where it's a standard, like where I live, there's a minimum wage. I'd imagine where you live, there's a legally mandated wage below which someone can't work, right? If it's below that, it's categorically illegal. But the question is, how is that wage set, and is it in fact a just wage? A just wage is predicated on natural justice, not man-made justice, natural justice. So is it sufficient to support the person that's earning the wage, support them in their lives and their family? If the answer is categorically no, that's a problem. And the answer sometimes is categorically no, but the person is earning the legally mandated minimum wage. And so I think when you as a business owner are making decisions around how you're compensating someone, it's easy to be like, whatever the minimum wage is, as long as I do that, I'm doing my duty. Be a better Christian than that. I think it doesn't mean you have to pay top of the market, right? There's no one saying that you have to pay more than everyone else is. That'd be nice if you could do that. That'd be terrific. But no one's saying you have to do that. But doing the bare minimum just so you can meet the legal threshold certainly doesn't seem to qualify as what's required from the perspective of a just wage.
Yeah, and I would just interject there. It's like the same thing with the faith. It's like just going to confession once a year
Yes.
and doing the bare minimum. Like, is that really like the fullness of the faith? No, it's not really. Like, just
Yes.
checking the boxes is not always right. And on the wage piece, it's too. I think it's very difficult. And maybe you have some thoughts here around. Some people may be doing the same work or even less. You could quote unquote valuable work in the business, but they have greater needs for their family.
Yes.
So I don't know if you're willing to talk about this publicly at all, but like how do people approach that? Because, somebody who has 5 kids versus somebody who has no kids and single, it's like a very different kind of requirement.
Yeah. That's a great question. I won't name organizations because of the nature of my work. I consult for a number of businesses and stuff, but this is actually something in some way, shape, or form I'm encountering right now. I'm in the fortunate position where I make a good living, and I have, my wife doesn't work. We've got one young child, but so I have obligations. Of course I do, but they're less heavy than are some people that I work with. And so the question is, if the organization itself is struggling, should I be, maybe because there's a buffer that I have that others might not have, should I, even though I'm not required to do so, should I be willing to maybe make some sacrifices that others aren't, so that this person who is in objectively greater need be okay? And those are hard questions to ask. They're hard to wrestle with, but I think it's important to do so. And I'm currently wrestling with it. So yeah, I'd say, is that always the case? No, of course not. And ideally, your business is making enough that you don't have to worry about these sorts of things. But I do think the reality is businesses go through ups and downs. Economies are cyclical. In the next financial crisis, whenever it comes, a lot of businesses will be hurting. And the question that I think, if you're a Catholic working in those businesses, if you're in a position where you could take blows that some of your brothers and sisters in Christ cannot take, maybe you should take some of those blows so that you can avoid it for them. I don't know. I think that's a matter of discernment for each individual. But I think you ought to ask yourself the question.
Yeah, and I would also say if you're in a position where it's too difficult to really like lean into it, at the bare minimum, you should be, I guess you could say, a good steward of the people who are working with you and help encourage them to be able to have side gigs and side income. Don't let them have to kind of run in the shadows with it, because a lot of people these days, it's very understood that many people have side hustles of some sort, even in the non-Catholic, like just kind of corporate world in general, because they don't feel that they're making enough money to provide for their family. If that is the case and you can't, provide more income for them, then allow them and be open to that. Just like be willing to have some grace there and work with them. The way I try to approach it, it's a very easy situation for me to do it, is with my contractors overseas. I had developed a lot of trust with them, and I understand, hey, what does your family need on a monthly basis so that you're covered? I'm not saying you're going to be living lavishly, but what do you kind of like need at the bare minimum? And then we have bonuses on top of that for performance. But it's like, because the gap of like how much they require is so big compared to the US, it's a lot easier for me to manage that. And that, I think, should be the goal of every business, is to build it in a way that you have healthy enough margins that you can manage that. Again, it's not necessarily always possible, especially in the West, but that might be something worth people chewing on. It's just really like, in your heart, what do you think is right? And making sure, I actually speak very openly about this with all, now I wouldn't say all of my contractors, but I actually speak openly about why this person needs more, because they're in a situation where they need it. And they happen to all be Catholics, so it's nice because they understand it. But then you get this understanding of helping each other and knowing that when it's their turn to need more, they'll be able to receive more, so they can have the leeway to not become jealous of their coworker. So again, it's not easy, but I think that this forces us to have a certain lens of charity that we look through. And again, as a business owner and the employee, we look through this lens of charity towards each other, that it's not just about us. We're here to do some kind of mission, and we're trying to provide for our family. So I hope that's a little bit helpful for other people. Totally. But let's go on to the next one, social responsibility of wealth. Yeah,
so I'd encourage anyone that's listening to just Google that term, social responsibility of wealth, and I'll keep it relatively high level and say, there's nothing wrong with wealth. The question is, what are you going to do with it if you are in the position where you can generate it? And a lot of people in our culture, I'd say, would buy extra cars and extra houses and go on extra fancy vacations. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things in principle. But is that really what you should be doing with a Christian spirit? And so I think if you are in the position where you've generated sufficient wealth, what ought you to be doing with it? And I'll anonymously use an example of someone that I know that I work with, who almost for me sets the standard of being radically generous from a place of radical prosperity, almost in a way that's really called me to account in some of the times where I won't be as generous as I think I need to be. And I'm not pretending I'm wealthy, right? Like I still have to work to make a living and stuff, but I'm certainly not struggling that much. And seeing this individual who has achieved a level of success that I can't even dream at, and his willingness to support those in need, do so charitably and not care what comes of it, and does so anonymously, doesn't want his name attached to almost anything, has been a real call to me to think seriously about the social responsibility of wealth. If you are in that position where you generate something, can you manage it with a Christian spirit? A focus on philanthropy and especially helping your brothers and sisters in Christ, but really just working for the common good, I think is something that we all need to be thinking about.
Yeah. The only thing I really would have to add here, I guess there's two things I would want to point out, is one, your skills don't even come from yourself. God gave you the skills, you hone them, and your interest, like all of the success you achieve, in my belief, yes, we participate, but how much is it really saying that we participate by, God brings us this snack and we decide, we'll accept it, right? It's like everything literally comes from him. So what you have is not meant for you, right? He didn't give us the skills for us to provide for ourselves. He gave us these skills to become instruments of his will in the world, and he'll take care of us as the lilies of the field, scripture talks about. So that's one thing for consideration on that point. The other thing I would add to this is, maybe this is not meant to be a dunk on your anonymous friend, but I actually believe that we need more people who have achieved large success to be willing to speak up. And I understand the perspective of wanting to be anonymous and humble. It's usually from a point of humility. Like, I've never seen anybody usually do it from other perspectives. But if you're willing to speak up about what you've achieved and give glory to God, which is where it really is due, it can inspire many other people to do so. And It gives more glory to God, right? In the first place, it really spreads like, hey, this person, like, they have all this, yet they're living in a small house and they drive a Toyota or whatever. Honestly, Toyota to me is a luxury. I love Toyotas.
Yeah.
But the point is, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're not driving a Maserati or something. So
Yeah.
I think that this is another perspective for anybody who is in that situation where they're not 100% sure, or they have achieved great things. Examine in your heart, are you willing to share those things? Because I personally believe that it opens you up to criticism. If you are sharing, then if there's cracks in what you're doing that are wrong, you'll receive the arrows, right? They'll definitely come at you. And then you can say, oh, is that true? And we can look at the example of Tom Monahan, who writes about this in his, or I shouldn't say he writes about it, in his in that biography by Joseph Pierce, talked about how he severely regrets all of the lavish lifestyle. And he went to not even flying on a private jet, which I still think that part's crazy. I would have kept flying on a private jet probably. But the point is, that's kind of, there's some examples of this, right? And maybe the final thing I would want to add here is that, especially if it is true that so many people are going to be displaced from their work with AI, the people who have the wealth have a very big responsibility to help their neighbor. And I'm not just talking about neighbors of people in third world countries. I'm talking about your neighbors at your parish, people that you know. And this means you have to be engaged with them. You have to know your your fellow parishioners, so that they can feel open to ask for help, because in America, at least, we hate asking for help. I don't know how it is in Canada, but it's really like nobody wants to ask for help here. So let's move on. We're going to keep trucking along.
Yeah. So the last two pieces, I think, here will takeaways for us to think about from Rerum Novarum: the imposition of limits on state intervention. So the document unequivocally, very clearly cautions against anything that is excessive state control. Excessive state control, effectively, we can associate with socialism or communism, right? And so the Catholic Church is not trying to say that the government doesn't have a very valid role to play in economic matters. Of course it does. But if that goes too far, and you can look at almost anywhere in the world where communism is utilized, you see it going too far, that fundamentally starts disrespecting human dignity, right? And we have to care about human dignity at the individual level, no matter who's the one doing the consideration. So a government doesn't get to disrespect the dignity of the individual people that it is supposedly trying to help out. And so I think, being aware of the limits of state intervention, it doesn't mean a free for all. We're not saying that. We're not saying no government, everyone do whatever they want. Of course, that's crazy. But there are very real limits to state intervention that I think are really critical. And the document highlights this at a time when it was becoming particularly apparent that governments needed to do something, because human dignity wasn't being respected and it was leading to potential outright class warfare.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add there. I think that moves over right into the next topic though, right? With harmony over conflict.
That's right. Yeah. So the last piece here would be harmony over conflict, which is the rejection, we can say, of that point of class warfare. We as Christians, we are called to love, right? Including loving our literal enemies, right? And that's complicated. That's difficult. But the document highlights the very real challenges that were faced in England and other countries where the Industrial Revolution had just torn holes in the fabrics of society that couldn't be used as an excuse to lead to outright conflict, right? Being upset is understandable. Doing harm to someone else because you're upset is a very different thing than being upset about something. And so an emphasis on harmony grounded in Christian fraternity, Christian charity, Christian love is a final important point to take away from Rerum.
Interesting. So I guess the point there would be like, if we see, increasing diversions of the wealthiest from the nots, the haves and the have-nots, as Catholics, we would not be pursuing the path of violence, is what it's pointing out.
Yes, more or less, and yeah, again, when it comes to violence and stuff, the times when violence is permissible. An example, someone breaks into my house and starts attacking my family. Yeah, I'm probably going to respond violently.
Yeah.
But I'm angry at someone at the office because they got a bonus and I didn't or whatever. Obviously, that's like, those are such radically different extremes. And so I think we need to focus as much as we can on harmony, dialogue, and the avoidance of conflict, especially if it leads to violence, which in places like, where socialism comes into place, there's always violence, always. Mm-hmm. And all these things are linked together, right? Like these things do all get linked together. But yeah, a focus on harmony if you're an employee speaking with your boss or whatever, maybe you have conflict with them. Coming at it, trying to de-emphasize the conflict and try to focus on harmony. I want to work with you. I want to love you. There should be a measure of friendship, hopefully, and stuff. Focusing on that as a way of avoiding class conflict.
Yeah. On a serious note, I mean, that's a Christian way. It's like, especially with family businesses, I find this to be a common topic. It's like, people are worried about having family in their business, but it also is a way that kind of forces you to rise above the occasions, to bicker at each other or whatnot. And it can be a source of unity and glue, if you will. If you're like, hey, we have to learn how to put on different hats here, right? I'm your brother or I'm your dad versus I'm your boss or I'm your peer. And I think this is it's something that I genuinely, I haven't talked much about this, but I genuinely believe as Catholics we have a greater ability to do this than anybody else, or we should, because of the way we view each other with Christian charity, aka trying to get our brother to heaven, or our fellow man to heaven. One last thing I want to ask about, you didn't necessarily prepare anything on this, but I thought about it as we were chatting today, is it's very common for people to talk about, the age of AI is going to make everything so prosperous that we'll just give everybody a universal basic income and call it a day. Can you just make some commentary on this and just like how the Catholic perspective would be on that?
Yeah, so I'll draw a lot on the wisdom and teachings of Saint Jose Maria Escrivá, founder of Opus Dei. Work is a good thing, right? The Genesis account, Adam was tilling the earth, whatever the terminology is, before the fall, right? Mm-hmm. So work, now he has to work by the sweat of his brow afterwards as a part of the fall. Like work can be really annoying and really frustrating and really debilitating, all that stuff. That is a result of the fall, right? Work itself is a beautiful thing. And so I think I worry a lot about people thinking that, we're going to have to work. So robots will do everything for us and we'll just be able to live on beaches all the time and all that. And it's like that utopian scenario is an awful scenario. Work is a good thing. And I think if you talk to people that have completely retired and don't have some meaningful hobbies or whatever, I think a lot of them will admit that. It's like it takes away a sense of their meaning, God-given meaning in their lives.
Yeah, I mean, any founder who sells their business usually goes through this basically like whatever post-sale crisis.
Exactly. And it's like, that's not accidental, right? Like there's something about us. God has built that into us, into our very nature, where work is a good thing. And so my concerns around AI and stuff I have a lot of concerns, but one of them is people are thinking about this like it's going to usher in, and I think Elon Musk, could probably be in this area, is hyper-abundance, material prosperity for everybody, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think it'll lead to a lot of people feeling a sense of meaninglessness. Mm-hmm. People being like, what is this all about? Work is a good thing. And we shouldn't be trying to get the robots to do it all for us. I think we should try to, if we can, find ways to integrate these technologies into the way that we work and make sure that the work is meaningful, but not try to outsource work to everyone else as if we're just going to live a life of leisure. And that's the answer to all our problems.
Yeah. I mean, even if it were possible, again, a positive way to choose to not work, I think that there can be positives there. So I would say I pretty much agree with you on everything. The only thing I would say, like as a caveat, would be that if we are living a well-ordered life, we can use these tools as tools. Like we don't have to, live at short lives because we're constantly like tilling the earth by hand, following an oxen around or something, right? Like we have tools that can be good for us, but we can never think that we should be fully replaced by that. We don't want them to do all of the things. There's even, I know some wealthy people who are like, listen, I have recognized that I haven't like done laundry in years, but I have a kid now and I need them to realize that dad does chores. I'm going to start doing chores around the house as soon as they get to age like 2 or 3 or something like that. I feel like they should honestly just do it now. But that is like, there's some certain kind of truth to that. And again, if anybody's questioning it, just look at the call in Genesis is that you shall be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth. It's literally in a single sentence, the two kind of core aspects of being human and obeying God's calling is those two things, like having families, again, for people called to that. And if you're called to the religious life, obviously not. And working and being co-creators effectively. So
yes.
I would also maybe add one other point is that if there is situations, we talked about it a bit earlier, where because of mass layoffs or whatnot, if you have the ability in your team or somebody's ill, this isn't saying we shouldn't provide for the families who need it, right? And especially in many cases, it may be an acute need. It might be only a few months, like maybe somebody's going through cancer treatments or whatnot. Like there's ways that we shouldn't be opposed to providing this income. I'm not going to call it UBI because it would be providing some kind of backstop for them while they're going through the situation. And in my opinion, as the business leader, if this is somebody on your team, an employee, you should use the opportunity, even if you're not running a Catholic team, by the way, so much easier if you are running a Catholic team. So I understand that's challenging, but even if you're not running a Catholic team, to point out that, hey, we believe this is the right thing for this person, so we're going to do this. I expect nobody to be jealous of this person because they're going through a tough time, and we're going to provide for it. Using it as a way to rally your team and to demonstrate what Christian charity is without necessarily saying those words, right?
Yes.
That would be my hope for people. So this is good. We covered a lot. I'm surprised we actually got through it all. So I think good job to us, pat ourselves on the back. Let me wrap up with just a couple kind of rapid fire pieces for you. So what is your, I guess, favorite scripture or holy readings, specifically as an entrepreneur? Like what kind of really speaks to you the most?
Yeah, I think one that comes to me oftentimes, and I think it appears in all the Gospels. I haven't checked my notes, but it's when Jesus admonishes us admonishes his followers there, but we take it to ourselves too, to take up our crosses and follow him. And I mean, we all have our daily crosses, like little crosses, like this, big ones for sure. But as a business owner, there's going to be stressful little things always. That's the nature of being an entrepreneur. And just own them, accept them, like pick them up, deal with them, and try to have a cheerful, optimistic spirit about it. I think is something that resonates with me as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, man. It took me a while to realize that. And I thought I knew this because I've read so many business books before I started my own business.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, it'll get to a point. It's going to be hard initially, but it'll be fine eventually. I was like, I mean, even the people who are running billion-dollar businesses, like it just gets harder. I feel like there's actually there's no light burdens. Like you have to just choose the life that you want to live and really get used to those kind of small prickly thorns, if you will. All right, next one. Who is your favorite entrepreneur and why?
So I don't have a specific entrepreneur. I would say anyone who's an entrepreneur that does this certain thing, if I hear about them, I'm like, you're my new favorite. And so what that is someone that is an entrepreneur and they really and truly live their faith while being an entrepreneur. Because I've seen so many people who proudly talk about their faith, but the way that they conduct themselves as an entrepreneur is anything other than what they ought to be doing as a person of faith. And so when I see someone that really takes their faith into the business that they're building and lives it, that whoever the newest person is, that's my favorite entrepreneur. That person.
I feel the same way, man. That's a great answer. I think we need to get you in the Catholic founders community. You can meet a ton of them. You'll have new friends every day. Who's your favorite saint and why?
I'll choose my confirmation saint, Saint Augustine of Hippo, for a lot of reasons, but his profound conversion story, in some respects, mimics mine. And yeah, I give him a lot of credit for me finding the Catholic Church and ultimately being here. So St. Augustine for sure.
Awesome. And then favorite devotion?
No, instead of favorite devotion, maybe I'll say favorite prayer. I struggle with pride. I think most of us do. I struggle with pride. And so once a day as part of my plan of life, I do the litany of humility. And when, there's some days where I rush through it too fast, but the days that I just sit there and wrestle with it, I feel like dirt at the end. And in a good way, in a good way, it's the prayer that I need, and so the litany of humility has a special place in my life.
That one is really like chewing on glass, man. If entrepreneurship is chewing on glass, that's like times 10,
Totally.
Cool, Matt. Well, this has been really awesome. I really appreciate you coming on. We'll have to do another episode sometime, talk about your businesses and what you're working on. But any final, I guess, plugs or offers or calls to action for the audience?
I'd say if you're totally unfamiliar with Rerum Novarum, it's a big document. So you can find a Cole's Notes or whatever online, but familiarize yourself with Catholic social teaching. These things matter, and they're going to matter more as AI disrupts our societies, our economies and stuff. And we as business leaders who care about the faith, I think, have an obligation to know how to encounter these circumstances grounded in the church and her teachings.
Yeah. And it's not just big business owners. Like, I think this is really important for anybody to recognize that AI will change pretty much everything. And even small business, I don't care if you have one employee, there's number one ways that you can use it to your advantage, but we have to be on the front lines explaining to people. We don't have to be shouting about it on the street corner, but we have to be very intentional about how we do it. Mm-hmm. And everybody has a responsibility. This is not just the companies who are building technology. It's if you're a plumber or whatever, like anybody has the responsibility. So I appreciate that, man. Thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely happy to be here.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this conversation with Travis and you want to meet other entrepreneurs and other people like him, people that you can build alongside, that you can have camaraderie with, that you can learn from, consider joining our paid community, the Catholic Founders Guild. It's $10 a month or $100 a year, and it's basically priced at the point anybody can afford it. Whether you are at the idea stage, you're actually building something, but if you are really serious about entrepreneurship as a Catholic, you should really be in this group. We've priced it so that anybody can afford it, and it's super important that we build together because being an entrepreneur on its own is very difficult, very lonely. It's even harder as a Catholic because you don't have that many role models to pull from. But if you have this Catholic Founders Guild, you have plenty of role models, people that you can build with, you can ask questions. We are trying to build the biggest network of Catholic entrepreneurs in the world so that everybody can come together, find their group of people, and then go really deep with them and build those friendships, build their faith together, and grow their businesses so that their businesses can become instruments of God's will in the world. Like I always say at the beginning of the episodes, we're trying to become instruments of God's will in the world. So if this is something that resonates with you or you want to learn more about it, go to our Substack and click upgrade to paid. You will do that, and any tier will technically get you access to the community and the paywalled content. We do have usually three monthly meetings, one on a specific topic, one that's kind of just a hangout call for the community, and one where we bring in some kind of expert to talk about a topic, and then we can have a Q&A. All those get recorded so that if you are a paid member and couldn't make it, you'll get access to it as well as the notes from the conversation. And the first step is, again, becoming a paid member on Substack. You'll get a follow-up email that allows you to apply and book a call with me so we can screen you to make sure you're a good fit for the community. Again, everybody does get screened to ensure it's high quality, but we're trying to lower the barriers. Again, $10 a month, $100 a year, anybody can afford it. So if you want a community of Catholic entrepreneurs to build with, upgrade to paid today, and we will try to get you in that community as soon as possible. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. God bless and happy building.